An Oscar. His most recent film, Killer Joe, will be released this summer. Please welcome Stuart Levine.
No, Stan. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming out to see a 40-year-old movie.
Tell me, when you see that film, what do you think of it?
You know, it's 40 years ago, Stuart, and I remember that when I started to work on the film with Bill Black, I had in my mind that it would be a kind of genre horror film. But then while we were preparing the picture, I got to know the president of Georgetown. It was a man named Father Robert Henley. And he gave us complete run of the Georgetown campus. And I got to go up into his office at the end of the day, and he had a bottle of J&B in his desk, and we'd sit around and have a drink. And one day he said to me, I've got something to show you. And he pulled out an old, beat-up red file case. And he handed it to me while we were throwing back shots of J&B. And it was the diary of the doctors and nurses and, you want me to use that? Sorry, guys. Did you hear anything I said? Okay. This is better. It was the diary of the doctors, and nurses, and priests who were involved in the case that this story was loosely based on. And it was a 14-year-old boy in Silver Spring, Maryland, and the family was Lutheran, and they tried everything. They went to every possible form of internal and external medicine to cure this boy, and nothing seemed to work. And one day it was their Lutheran pastor who told them to go to the Catholic Church and to try an exorcism. And so there were 3 cases in the 20th century that I'm aware of that the Catholic Church authorized as demonic possession in the United States. You know, as opposed to what you read now, there's a different case of possession almost every week somewhere. But in those days, it really wasn't like that. And this was the 1949 case, which is what inspired Bill to write this, is the one that took place in Silver Spring. As I say, it was a young man who retired about 7 or 8 years ago from NASA. And he has no memory of what happened to him as a child. When I read these diaries, I knew that this was, you know, much more than a horror film. And I resisted all impulses that I may have had to push the horror aspect. To me, Blatty and I never spoke about a horror film. We spoke about a film about the mystery of faith. And that's what attracted me to it, and that's why it was done the way it was.
What were the biggest challenges directing it?
Well, of course, the special effects had never been done. None of this. So we had to do everything mechanically. There were several attempts at the makeup, and Dick Smith, who I know you all know or have heard of, did many different passes. And then one day, it occurred to me that what was wrong with the stuff that he was showing me was that it was not generic in any way. It was just horror film makeup. And I remember thinking about that, and I said to him one day, Dick, there is this scene in the film where you see the little girl masturbating with a crucifix. It may be possible that she has used this crucifix on her face, and that the wounds result from that. The scars and the makeup result from these gangrenous wounds. And Dick got a hold of some books on gangrenous wounds and people who were severely burned in fire, and he took a whole new approach to the makeup. Because the original makeup that we had tested, you see little flash frames of it. You've seen the subliminal cuts, haven't you? You guys are all hip to that. Those were our original makeup tests. Not on Linda Blair. Those are on a stand-in that's really in the film for about 12 seconds. But we did the makeup tests on her, the white face thing, and it didn't work as makeup, but I used little frames of it for subliminal cuts of the demon.
Why don't we do one question, we'll bring our other guests out. Sure, straight ahead.
Does anyone have a good question? Well, only a good question, not something stupid.
Sure, go ahead. All right, a lot of pressure right now, go ahead.
Yeah.
Stand up.
Cool.
Right there.
Hi, my name is Brian.
Hi, Brian.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Next. Go ahead.
There are a lot of films that their directors seem to be drawn to. It seems to be that there's a natural for a kind of story. Tim Burton gets drawn to a certain type of script or attached, and the Coen brothers, they may get attached to something because it just draws them right in. Were you the right man for the right moment for the right script, or was it something a little deeper for you that drew you in and really kind of touched you in a way after you read it and you felt, I do want to be attached to this because maybe something had happened in the past that was kind of stirred up some emotion?
No. But I will tell you this, that Bill Gladdy had never seen anything that I directed when he offered me The Exorcist. I'm going to take a minute and tell him this story, okay? Originally, I had made one film in the late 60s with Sonny and Cher. It was called Good Times. You guys know who Sonny? Thanks. You guys know the film Good Times? If you don't, get the hell out of here. I made this one film. It's not good, Mom. It's pretty bad. But it was my first film. Before that, I had done documentaries and live television. But the film got a lot of attention in Hollywood. And this Blake Edwards was directing, was planning to produce a feature film of his television series, Peter Gunn. Did you ever hear of Peter Gunn? If not. But anyway, he called me. I was a young guy. And he called me in to meet with him about directing the feature film of Peter Gunn. And I loved the show. I thought it was a great television show. And it was a terrific opportunity for me. And I went to his office. He gave me the script. I took it home. Home then for me was the Sunset Marquee. I had a little flat at the Sunset Marquee. You all know where that is. Okay. And I read the script and I hated it. It was terrible. And I went in to see Blake the following Monday. And I sat down and he prepared breakfast. He had breakfast for the two of us, English muffin, cup of tea. And he said, so? And I said, Blake, this is the worst script I've ever read. I said, your worst enemy wouldn't do this to you. And he stood up, and he was a black belt karate. He stood up, and he said, what do you know? You're nothing but a punk kid. You don't know anything. And you're telling me this script is no good? Hi, George. How are you? And I said, Blake, it's awful. I'd love to work with you, but I can't do this. It's just terrible. And there were some people in the room. They were in the shadows. I didn't see them. I didn't know who they were, studio guys, whatever. And I left, And as I left the building, this guy came running after me. And he said, Mr. Friedkin. I said, yeah, I was going to the parking lot at Paramount. And he said, my name is Bill Blatty, and I'm the guy who wrote that script. I said, geez, I'm sorry, I didn't see your name on it. And he said, well, that often happens with play. And he said, but I wrote it. He said, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The script is no good. We've all told this to Blake. He just wants to make the picture and get paid and move on. Now, he was a great director, but he had a company and he needed to have a lot of films go through it. So I didn't see Blatty after that for 4 years. And I was on tour with the French Connection 4 years later. And before I left Los Angeles to go to the East Coast, there was a package that came in the mail in a brown paper bag. And it was from William Peter Blatty. And I only remember this terrible script of Peter Gunn. And so I threw the package into my suitcase and forgot about it and took it with me across country. And then when I came back, by way of San Francisco, my last night of this tour, I had dinner plans at 8. I finished my interviews at 5, and I opened this package and sat down with a view of the Golden Gate Bridge out the window, and I sat down in a very comfortable chair, and I started to read the novel, The Exorcist. And I canceled my dinner plans and read the whole thing that night, and I was flabbergasted. And he had his phone number on the script, and I called him and I said, Bill, this is sensational. This is just great. And he told me some of the background, which we may cover later. And he said, would you like to direct the film? And I said, why? You know, he said, because you're the only director who ever told me the truth about one of my scripts. He had not seen The French Connection or the 2 other films I had made before that. And that's how I got to direct the film. It was kismet or fate or an act of God.
That's great. Well, we're talking about the book. As we're talking about the book, it's kind of a great segue to introduce our guest from the Geffen. John Pielmeier is the acclaimed playwright of the world premiere stage adaptation of The Exorcist, which is coming to the Geffen Playhouse in July. His previous works include the award-winning play Agnes of God, which, similar to The Exorcist, primarily deals with a crisis in Catholic faith. Please welcome John Pielmeier. And our other guest,
John, lovely to meet you.
Our other guest, Randall Arney, is artistic director of the Geffen. He's responsible for selecting and shepherding the new production of The Exorcist onto the stage. Please welcome Randall Arney. So, John, talk a little bit about the process. The play coming to the Geffen is based on the book, not the film. So kind of talk about your process and kind of putting that together.
Well, when the opportunity came to me to adapt this book to the stage, my instant reaction was, actually the first question that most people ask me is, how are you going to make our head turn around? And I thought, you know, that's not the kind of thing we want to see on the stage. And I felt very strongly that, first of all, I just think this is a fucking brilliant movie. And there was no way that I wanted to try to replicate the movie on the stage. And I met with Bill Blatty and I said, look, the way I would want to do this is with a minimal cast, 6 or slightly more. We ended up with 9. And with no special effects, or very minimal special effects. And a play that was incredibly theatrical and presentational. And he liked that idea. He responded to that and gave me permission to go off and write it. And I When I sent him the first draft, he was just incredibly supportive of it, and we went on from there.
Yeah, you did. It's incredibly